In this video, I'm going to be going over how to set up and use the breadboard power supplies. There are a few things that are important about these that you really need to make sure you follow my instructions, otherwise they can easily be damaged. And the problem is that when they fail, when they're shorted or when there's a problem with them, they end up putting typically 12 volts on the supply rails, which is not good. So if you can please pay attention to this as we go through it. Hopefully we'll be able to have good success with using these each semester. So a couple of things. Since we have all of these power rails connected together, we only really need to use one set of outputs. You'll notice that there are these two little devices here. These are voltage regulators. And my goal is that we only hook up one so that if one gets damaged, we could use the other one potentially. So there are these little things called shorting blocks, which are these little, in this case, yellow little connectors, and they basically will short out these header pins. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 5-volt connection on this side here. If we switch it to the other two pins, it's 3.3. We won't typically be using that. Use it 5 volts there. And then we're going to put this other one up on the top here to off in the middle. That's because each one of these can provide separate voltages, and we don't want both voltage regulators at the same time. And additionally, if one of the outputs doesn't end up working, I think we could probably switch to the other one pretty safely. So let me go over what I would like you to do is before you do each lab, do a voltage measurement to make sure that everything's correct, and also to make sure there aren't any short circuits on your board. So I'll go over that in a second here. So now I have the adapter plugged in, and please use the adapter that I've provided with the supplies here in the little white box typically. And if you push the button, the LED should come on, indicating there's power. And again, before we actually use these, what I'd like you to do is, and I would really prefer you do this before the beginning of each lab so we don't damage components, is let's go ahead and measure the voltage on the output. And if your buses are all connected together, you should be able to measure this at any point on your breadboard. And you want to do this anyway as a quick check the first time to make sure that all your buses are connected together, as I showed in the previous video. So we have our meter set here for the 20 volt scale. If I measure the voltage across the output here, we have 5.01 volts, which is fine. Now, the other thing I'm going to ask you to check is I'm going to turn off the power supply, disconnect it, and then what I'm going to do here is make sure that I do not, actually you should probably do this before you plug the power supply in, is make sure there's no short circuit across these pins, okay? So if we measure the resistance here, like for example at a 2000 ohm setting, we should have 0 resistance, okay, 0 ohms. But let's say for example you accidentally had shorted out the power supply pins, like that, okay? If we now measure the resistance, we have something very low on the low order of ohms. And that will damage the power supply. So what I'd like you to do is before powering up any circuit, check to make sure that there's no short circuit there, okay? Which is very easy to do when we're wiring these circuits up. And then also check the output voltage on the power supply as we're using it. Okay, so I think that's the main kind of things I wanted to go over. Another kind of important thing is making sure that the positive and negative leads, let me zoom in a little closer here. Focus. Okay, the other thing that's important is making sure that the positive lead is connected on the red strip and the negative is on the negative. Same thing here. Okay, I've also noticed it's a little easy to kind of skew these pins, so they're kind of at an angle, so make sure they're lined up so that the board is plugged in parallel with the breadboard. Again, if it's not working, double check and make sure the power switch is on. The LED should light up. So we'll be using these throughout the semester. I've given you a second one, but if we're careful, I think we can probably make it through with just this one.